Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sonali Doshi, and I'm the director of the Kennedy Political Union, American University's student-run, nonpartisan speakers bureau that has been bringing the most politically relevant speakers for over 50 years now. It is my honor to welcome you to tonight's event, KPU Presents the Afghanistan Project, a panel on relocation and resettlement of Afghan refugees. Tonight, we are honored to partner with Operation Sacred Promise, a nonprofit organization comprised entirely of over 200 volunteers. The organization offers wide-scale evacuation and resettlement assistance to our allies from the Afghan Air Force and Army Special Mission Wing and their families. For more information on Operation Sacred Promise, please visit opsacredpromise.org. And to stay up to date with the rest of our events for the semester, follow at AUSGKPU on all platforms. Without further ado, I am honored to introduce the moderator for this evening, Fatema Ahmadi. Ms. Ahmadi is a champion of peacebuilding and peace process initiatives in Afghanistan. She managed numerous peace journalist development partnerships, as well as peacebuilding projects with civil society and communities, including the Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding Program that trained young people in nonviolent responses. Previously, she also led USAID's funded project called Combating Human Trafficking in Afghanistan, spearheading initiatives to create a national trafficking referral form and co-write the first national TIP training manual. Prior to her work in anti-trafficking, she worked with refugee children through the Child Labor Association and the UNHCR for Afghan refugees in Iran. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Ahmadi and our panelists for the evening.
For the American University for organizing this session to talk about the situation that Afghan refugees facing every day right now, and to hear from your professional and personal experience on this issue. I'm going to introduce our very distinguished panelists tonight with us, starting with Ambassador Sam Brownback. Ambassador was sworn as Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom on February 1st, 2018. He served as a governor of Kansas from 2011 to 2018. Previously, he served as a U.S. Senator from 1996 to 2011 and a U.S. representative in the House of Representatives from 1995 to 1996 from Kansas. While a member of the Senate, he worked actively on the issues of religious freedom in multiple countries, and he was a key sponsor of the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. He also served as Kansas Senator of Agriculture from 1986 to 1993, and he was a White House Fellow in the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative from 1999 to 1991. Prior to his public service, Ambassador Brownback was a private attorney in Kansas and taught agriculture law at Kansas University and co-authoring 2 books on the subject. He earned a BA from Kansas University and a JD from University of Kansas. The second one, Laila Jafary from Afghanistan, as a permanent civil society and women's rights activist in Afghanistan. She was also a member of High Peace Council, a government body constituted to facilitate peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. In addition to that, before the fall of Afghan government, she had worked as a director of political organizations and integrations of civil society institutions at the State Ministry of Peace, where those organizations and institutions are given the opportunity to take part in the intra-Afghan peace negotiations to represent those Afghans who were left behind. Owen is the CEO of Reinaert LLC and is a primary operation recovery partner representing Afghanistan operations. Mr. Owen spent almost 7 years on active duty and subsequent 10 years as a contractor in the defense industry, working in a myriad of intelligence practices before starting his company. During the crisis of fall of Afghanistan, Mr. Owen began working to integrate and collaborate with other civil liaison networks to ensure the high capacity of the network and LPRs and Afghan who were at risk could be served. Mr. Owen saw an opportunity to also begin elevating these discussions to multinational level and begin using this his network crafted over the previous 70 years. Over 70 years in the defense industry to pursue partnerships with humanitarian organizations and other countries to add alternative route to for at-risk Afghans that may not be eligible to come to America. Mr. Owen's journey continues in an unprecedented reality, attempting to coordinate humanitarian assistance to American Afghans allies. The last one, Miss Nasima, she was born in Afghanistan, but she could come to America when her father got a scholarship to continue his doctorate in the US. It was before the Soviet Union invasion, and her father could secure the visas, the children to come to America. Ms. Nasima attended school in Texas State, and she was able to complete a requirement for a diploma, and she developed a deep love for her new country, as America. She could see a good potential of freedom and opportunities, and immediately upon returning 18, she enlisted in the Air Force, and she showed remarkable determination, and she was able to get her bachelor degree and master's degree and raising 2 daughters. When this September 11th happened in the US, the need for people who could speak the language Pashto of insurgent increased, and because of the Taliban. And LT Nasima was only serving member in the Air Force in that time, that possibly in the entire Department of Defense who understood the language. And Ms. Nasima served at this job. She was serving as this job as a human resources officer with no combat experience in that time. But in a matter of few short days, she changed from her desk job to flying combat missions over Afghanistan as a airborne, working with the Air Force in Afghanistan from American side. Her maturity and language experience immediately started paying dividends for US forces, where she ensured the safety of friendly forces and assisted counter-terrorism efforts. After deploying to Afghanistan, and she did a lot of activities there, she got medals specifically for flying combat missions. And she worked also with some of the intelligence support in the entire Air Force of the US and ground operation in Afghanistan. And her ability of linguistic and intelligence skill directly contributed to resolving thousands of insurgency and from the battlefield, and saving hundreds of aircrafts, coalitions, and Afghan lives. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending tonight's sessions. As you can see, we have very distinguished guests tonight, and I'm very honored to moderate this session. And I would like to start with Ambassador asking, you see the situation of Afghanistan right now, and Afghanistan refugee crisis has been always on the top of the media. But do you see the unexpected withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan impacted the Afghan refugee crisis around the world? And if you believe that, how this impacted the situation?
Well, thanks for the question. And first, I want to thank American University for putting this on. I think there hasn't been near enough coverage of what's happening to Afghan refugees, particularly after the withdrawal of US troops. This has been a disaster, and it's ongoing, and it continues. So I'm pleased that American University is putting this on to draw some attention to this catastrophe. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Ambassador, we cannot hear you.
Okay.
Now we can hear. Thank
Okay,
you.
Good. Yeah, I don't know. My computer's been messing up some here. There will be a high profile massacre of religious minorities of some group. And there is a likelihood of being a genocide of religious minorities within the upcoming year if we don't act more aggressively. If the United States doesn't get more proactive in helping remove and get people out of harm's way that are in Afghanistan now, and being able to allow the refugees that are in other parts of the world to resettle in some semblance of orderliness around the world. This is going to happen. There's going to be a slaughter. There's likely to be a genocide within a year. We've got to get these people to safety, and the United States needs to be more helpful in doing this. The State Department's not being helpful in this. There's been a lot of blockage of individuals, and yet we still see private groups working aggressively to get people moved out of the country, to get them out of harm's way. And I'm talking particularly about religious minorities. I've been working since about 3 weeks after we pulled our troops out with a small coalition of groups that are working to get religious minorities out of the country. These are Ahmadis. They were some Hindus. The Sikhs have all already left. Christian converts, some Shia that are trying to get out of the country. And well, I've been working with this coalition. It also includes a number of former military operators who have been helping to move people out of the nation so that they can get to safety. And this group has been very dedicated to people. They're not getting paid for doing this, but they just see the humanitarian crisis. Now our biggest problem is finding countries that will long-term take people from Afghanistan. We've got thousands in humanitarian cities still at the present time. The United States hasn't opened up for religious minorities. Brazil is taking some, and that's been helpful. There are some other countries that are taking some that have been helpful, but the United States needs to do more. And we need to take more of these religious minorities. Here is a situation, much of which is our creation. And we need to step up and to take more of these refugees, and particularly religious minorities that have a death sentence. If you're a Christian convert and in hiding in Afghanistan today, if you get found, there's a high likelihood that you could be killed, and your family members as well. If you're an Ahmadi and you're in hiding in Afghanistan now, there's a good likelihood that you would get killed if you're found out. These people need to be helped, and they need to be helped now. And I fear what's going to happen is there's going to be a slaughter of some 20, 30, 50 Christian converts, Ahmadis, Shia, and it's going to draw the world's attention. And then the United States may act more aggressively in allowing people to move out of the country when we need to do it now before people are killed. And we could get further down the road here and that the Taliban just decides we're going to kill this entire population of this group that's left, that they've found where most of them are, that they round them up and just going to kill them. And it is a desperate situation for a number of people, and we need to be taking this much more aggressively and much more seriously.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for paying more attention on minorities and religious minorities in Afghanistan. We've been seeing so many supports and efforts from the organizations and NGOs that's working for to evacuate people. But we've been seeing also, as you mentioned, some of the organizations were not doing enough. Then I'm going to give Shirzad the time to translate this for Laila, and then going to the next question.
خانم لیلا، سفیر صاحب گفتن که ما متوجه شدیم که راپورا و معلومات اینایی که دارن در افغانستان قرار است در می سال آینده یک قتل عام بسیار کلان در افغانستان رخ بده، خصوصا او کسایی که در اقلیت قرار دارن، به طور مثال بعضی از شیعه ها هستند، بعضی از اقوام هستند که در اقلیت قرار دارن. اینا فکر میکنن که بسیار یک فاجعه بزرگ به اونا رخ خواهد داد و اینا میگن که امریکا فعلا اقدام خاص نکرده که از این کار جلوگیری کنن، در حالی که امریکا باید امیال یک اقدام بکنه پیش از این که یک فاجعه رخ بده. به طور مثال کسایی که به دین عیسویت را پیدا کردن و یا دین عیسویت قبول کردن، شاید 20 30 یا 50 نفر از اونا را طالبان از بین ببره، بعد از او امریکا بیدار خواهد شد و فکر خواهد کردن که ما باید اقدام کنیم. و بعضی ممالک هستن که فعلا قبول کردن که ما اقلیت ها را میپذیریم بجز از امریکا و امریکا باید این اقدام هر چیز زودتر بکنه.
So, with considering the situation for Afghans, I would like to ask, what was your personal experience as someone who left Afghanistan and you saw, other people with you who had to leave immediately? What was your experience? What did you see when that happened, when the government collapsed? Laila John, can you just elaborate on this?
اوکی، خانم لیلا از شما میپرسن وقتی که یک فاجعه بزرگ در افغانستان رخ داد، تجربه شما چی بود؟ بالای شما چی گذشت؟ چی فکر میکردین؟ چی احساس میکردین و کدام تجربه به دست آوردین؟
بسیار تشکر. من هم سلام میگم خدمت همه بزرگانی که در این پروگرام حضور دارن. تشکر میکنم از امریکن یونیورسیتی که زمینه را فراهم کرده.
Hello everyone. I would like to thank all the panelists and the university for creating such an event.
من میخوایم بگم که در 15 اگست 2021 اتفاقی را که من با چشم خود دیدم فکر نمی کنم تا زمانی که بمیرم فراموش کنم. بسیار تلخ و تکان دهنده بود.
The event which I witnessed on August 15, 2021, I will never ever forget that. It was a very shocking event for me.
آنچه که من با چشم خود دیدم، سربازان امریکایی همینطوری که سربازان امریکا و ناتو در 20 سال که کنار مردم افغانستان بودن، اما در روزهای تخلیه هم همراه ما بودن. این برای من یک امید را داد. بعد از خدا امید ما به همین سربازا و کشورهای کمک کننده بود که ما را میخواستن از افغانستان خارج کنن.
Like the past 20 years, United States forces, they helped Afghanistan really a lot. And when the regime collapsed, she witnessed that still there were US soldiers helping Afghans and evacuating them. And that gave her a high hope. After God, it was only Americans and the allies who really who were trying to help Afghans and evacuate them from Afghanistan.
من شاید از جمله آدم‌های خوشبخت بودم که 3 زن فقط تنها زندگی می‌کردیم در کابل. من، دخترم و خواهرم. ما خوشبخت بودیم که ما را کمک کردین و ما فعلا در اینجا در آمریکا سیف و راحت هستیم.
She is telling that we were among those lucky people who got this chance. 3 ladies, they were living together. Laila Jafary, her daughter, and her sister. And they are very thankful that United States evacuated them and they are safe now.
حادثه 15 اگست برای من بسیار تکان دهنده بود. مثل ازی بود که بلندترین و محکمترین کوهی که من در عمر خود دیده بودم اید فرو پاشید و ما دیگه هیچ تکیه‌گاهی نداشتیم. بسیار تلخ بود.
The event which happened on August 15, it was very shocking for me. And it was like a mountain splitting into pieces in just 1 second.
من ناراحتم. من بسیار ناراحت و ناامید هستم از تمام سربازان جوانان امریکایی و افغان و سایر کشورها که در 20 سال شهید شدن، خون دادن، معلول شدن، اما امروز دیدیم که جانفشانی از اونا بی نتیجه بود. این تلخ است برای من.
I really feel sorry for all those losses which United States forces, Afghan army, and other allies, they lost so many lives in Afghanistan. But after all, it didn't have any good result, and all of a sudden it happened.
برای من هنوز قابل باور نیست که 20 سال برای ارزش‌های حقوق بشری، حقوق زنان، حقوق اطفال، دموکراسی، برابری، عدالت اجتماعی مبارزه کردیم ولی همه‌شان نابود و ناپدید شد.
I still can't imagine all those efforts in 20 years which we put for human rights, women rights, children rights, equity, and other efforts which Afghans put, and all of them just vanished.
همینطوری که پیشتر اگر اشتباه نکنم جناب سفیر صاحب صحبت کردن، ما جسم ما در امریکا هست فعلا، اما روح ما در افغانستان است و همه ما ناراحت هستیم که امو خطر بزرگی که نسبت به اقلیت‌های مذهبی و قومی وجود داره، ما هر لحظه احساس می‌کنیم که اون لحظه رسیده و نزدیکان ما و مردم ما در خطر هستند.
I think Mr. Ambassador also mentioned this point, and I'm feeling like physically I'm present in United States, but mentally I'm still in Afghanistan. And every moment I expect that event to happen, that genocide against the minorities.
توقع ما به عنوان یک انسان میخوایم بگم، به عنوان یک انسان این هست که ایالات متحده آمریکا همونطوری که دمی 20 سال کنار ما بودن، کنار مردم ما بودن، حالا هم میتونه کمک شود. میتوانیم فرصتی داشته باشیم که زحمات 20 سال خود را برگردانیم به جامعه، دوباره از نو میتونیم بسازیم. تشکر.
We expect that United States can help Afghans again and can do more the way they did in past 20 years, so that we have hopes and we can revive all those efforts which we put in those past 20 years.
تشکر. حرفای ما تمام شد فعلا. ممنون
Thank you.
هستم از شما.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jafary. I would like to hear from Mr. Owen about his idea, what he witnessed when he was helping Afghan refugees, and what is your view on this crisis? You also have personal experience working with Afghan allies, helping them to get to safety, and also, you did a lot of advocacy for them. How do you see this situation?
First of all, thank you very much for the chance to be on the panel, to everyone at KPU. Yes, I started working in this problem set around the 15th, I think it was actually the 16th of August, trying to help get people into HKIA or Hamid Karzai Airport, and seeing how this problem set affected people who are from the special operations community, who have seen combat in various war zones, have gone through very harsh training, have gone through mental resiliency training, specifically been built up to handle all of these kinds of high stress environments, absolutely crumble at the concept that the U.S. government would spend 20 years, countless deaths, it's not countless, but there's several thousand deaths rather, a lot of it shouldered on the soft community, and they're just going to abandon it. A lot of people wanted to point fingers at one administration or another. There has been failures in Afghanistan from the beginning as an American failure, not just specifically an administration's failure in any administration along the way. And the one thing that comes up continually in the group that I've consistently worked with, being the special operations community, is that there is a moral injury to our country and our military members and veteran community, specifically because of this. We have a lot of the folks that I've worked with have been the Green Berets, and the Green Beret community specifically has gone in, and their whole mission is to train partner forces, live with them, work with them, train them, and teach them how to be better soldiers, how to do the things that they do. And then that guerrilla concept of basically going in and fighting the war for them. We, to the points that were just made, we spent 20 years doing that, and then we pulled all support for that entire country. So we not only have these religious minorities, we not only have all this money that we poured into training judges, helping uplift females, helping uplift people from different various backgrounds of sexuality and all the religious preferences. We took all of that, and on top of that, we also went down the path of helping train and enable military operations and special operations against the Taliban for 20 years. And we pulled the plug on everything and left all of those individuals there at the hands of the Taliban. So people who have been in charge of prisons, people who have been in charge of training other people in the Afghan military to go do the job that we put them in the role to do. All of those folks that have been helping protect all of these freedoms, of these democracies, of this democratic society that we've enabled, we just left them there just at the hands of the Taliban to die. And I think that is to compound to the issues of not just the concepts having in these different views. We have the social cultural, we have the ethnic, and then we also have this horrendous scenario with the military that we put these people in, and it should not be overlooked.
Right. So we heard a lot about what organizations and individuals put together to help Afghan allies to get into America or any other countries to have safety, because they are immediately at risk of being tortured, being prosecuted, and everything. How do you see the Americans' government response to the situation? They just left the country immediately, and they tried to help some of the people, but generally, how do you see they respond? Was it really impactful? Was it really helpful? Or any of you, how do you see this support for Afghanistan? And the
The
people who have been with Americans for the last 20 years.
so I don't know the numbers. I was trying to look this up earlier. I don't know the numbers, but I don't believe it's to the same level of the support that was provided to folks in at the after the fall of the war and the status of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. There was hundreds, maybe thousands, but that mission went on until I believe the last plane that came out bringing our allies out of Vietnam was in the late 90s. So it was either mid or late 90s. But the fact that that mission went on for 40 plus years to try and help our allies should have been something that as Americans that we learned from. And I personally know folks who spoke to individuals who are helping that specific problem set to try and a lot of these folks, and that I know specifically because of my ties to the Green Beret community, were in that capacity in Vietnam, and it was the same problem. It was, we went in, we trained these people, we helped them uplift this democratic kind of society, this ideal. We pushed this on them and said, this is a life that you can come to love. And then we pulled it away from them and left them there to deal with the consequences. And something similar is, well, actually exactly what we did there, we did not learn from, and we're experiencing that in Afghanistan. Largely, the government sat back, not entirely, but largely, the government sat back and basically just washed their hands of the problem and showed very little concern as to the realities that would take place once the Taliban came back in and took full control. They tried to play it off. They tried to dismiss a lot of the realities that were being discussed as what could happen. It wasn't, admittedly, it wasn't as bad as we had expected it to be. But the Taliban is in a different position now, and they're facing some different issues that they have to be mindful of if they want to be a player on the world stage. So largely, it's somewhat pathetic is the response that the government had to the crisis, and the crisis at the downfall of HKIA, and then the current crisis that's still going on. And I don't see it changing anytime soon. It seems to have shifted entirely to Ukraine. The thousands and thousands and thousands of volunteers, I would probably argue that it's close to 10,000 people have volunteered in a short span of about 7 to 8 months from the veteran and civilian communities to help support this. They are all trying to keep this in the limelight, and it's suffering the casualties of the things that are going on in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. We have now Ms. Nasima with us. We would like to hear from you. How do you actually monitor this situation? How do you see the support from the American government to Afghan refugees and Afghan allies? Was it really satisfying from your view, or you see other part of it? Ms. Nasima, you are muted.
There we go. Sorry.
Thank
I
you.
have two computers and I couldn't get the computers. Now I'm on my phone, so I apologize. First of all, thank you for having me. And I agree with everything the panelists have said prior to me speaking. I was able to hear everything they were saying. First of all, I never thought we would leave Bagram. There's so many different, to answer your question, how did we do leaving? We failed. We failed on so many different levels. We failed on the humanity side, leaving all those individuals behind. As the ambassador was saying about the genocide, I think it's going to be beyond just religion. I think it's also going to be ethnic genocide. I think it's also going to be even the Pashtuns that are, not, because the religion that the Taliban believe in is one of the strictest form in the world. And their belief is if you don't have the same beliefs as they do, regardless that you call yourself a Muslim, it's not good enough. So I think, it's not just going to be religion, it's going to be ethnic minorities, it's going to be, and it's already happening. I mean, the signal channels I'm on, I've seen some devastation. So going back to how we left, initially, honestly, I wasn't paying that much attention because I didn't think we would ever leave. I mean, not perspective of combat operations. I'm just talking about the training and assist, because the Afghans were not ready. And for people to say, well, they took us by surprise, I beg to differ. I worked in intelligence since 9/11. Even we used to joke about it. We used to say, it was first Karzai, then Afshar Ghani. We used to joke about it that they're only the governor of Kabul, and if it wasn't for our protection, they wouldn't even be governor. So we knew for a long time that there were shadow governments and all these different provinces. So, and I think Josh said it, one of the things that about our history. My biggest fear for immediate is the Afghans dying of starvation, because there's no food, there's no water. We've cut off their economy. Yes, we don't need to work with terrorism as Americans, but there's got to be a way that we get aid to the Afghan people. They're not the ones that that caused this. And in a lot of ways, like Josh said, we did over the last 20 years. Second is, once we get the food and aid, take care of the immediate, we have got to get out the people that fought with us side by side. Some call them, special immigrant advocates, applicants, whatever your label is, they fought next to us. They died for us. They lost their limbs for us. When we were in a firefight, they didn't look and say, you know what, you're not an Afghan, so I'm not going to fight with you. In my case, it's a little different, but I'm just talking in general. They dove on mines for us. So yeah, maybe they don't wear the US uniform, but they fought side by side for us. And for us to leave them and to be slaughtered like this is disgraceful. And I'm sorry, I'm getting so emotional about this, but, and Kate knows this, since August, I think most of us have not slept. And that's why I think this panel is so crucial, because we need to go back and we need to let people know that Afghanistan is still there. If not, it's much worse than it was in August. Because now the Taliban has done all these searches, they've collected all these weapons, and they're basically, at random, hanging people, killing people. I've lost at least 3 relatives since this has started. And it's just, and when you say about the US government support, I have personally written probably 10 times to the White House, at least about 300 emails to either senators, congressmen, and not just mine, I'm talking like across the country, to military leaders, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Air Force, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the VA Secretary. I've written these letters to them. I've written articles, I've given interviews, but for some reason, we just kind of like, I don't know if it's just Americans have kind of moved on and says, Afghanistan, we were there 20 years, what's the big deal? But what I fear for in the future, besides the problems we currently have, is that one, the training camps are already being built again in Helmand province and different provinces. And Helmand was historically one of our worst provinces when we were fighting there. So the insurgents are coming right back. 2, Bagram, about a couple of weeks after we left, the Chinese arrived, and then we left all that equipment behind. So when my fear is we will be attacked. I know we will be attacked. I just don't know when and where and at what level, because these insurgent groups, it's not like they said, hey, you know what, America, we like you now. No, they don't. They're going to continue. And one of the things I found out recently, and I need to figure out how to get this to the intelligence now that I'm retired, but they're given, the Taliban is given passports to the Chechen rebels, to the Iranians, to all those other foreign fighters. And the reason why they're giving these Afghan passports to them is because if I give you an Afghan passport, you're no longer a foreign fighter. You're an Afghan now. And while America's busy, yes, I'm devastated over what's going on in Ukraine, but we cannot take our balls off of Afghanistan, because we will be back. And that's where, when Josh says we don't learn from our history, that is so true. That's my biggest fear for Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nasima. It's very emotional for people who work with Afghans, who lived in Afghanistan, to talk about the situation and crisis that Afghans are going through, and the help and support is really, really limited now. we mentioned about Ukraine's crisis, and we have the students here to listen to the panelists and for their advices and suggestions. We know because of this crisis happened in Ukraine, we actually lost the attention from the international community and organizations who are supporting refugees from Afghanistan. How we can, as a community now in the US and the students particularly, can bring that attention back. What kind of activities they can do and everybody else can do to, again, push everybody to understand what is happening in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a country that Americans have spent 20 years, so it's not something that we just forget about it overnight. What we can do for bringing back that attention, that support for Afghan refugees and Afghan people.
If I may, so I have a couple quick suggestions. I mean, they're quick suggestions, but I think it will work. One, we have to get on the media to tell the truth about what's going on in Afghanistan. And because part of our culture is whatever's on TV is what we believe, and we have to do our own homework. And right now, 24 hours you're hearing about Ukraine, where, in the past it was about Afghanistan, whatever the issue is, it's just 24-hour coverage. And there's got to be, so first I think we have to get the headlines out there of what is the current conditions on the ground. I mean, when I see pictures of young kids being starved, how do you live with that? I mean, I am a retired United States Air Force, and I would turn around and I served 26 years active duty and 7 years afterwards supporting this great nation of ours. And I thank God every day that when I wake up that I am an American woman, because I know in Afghanistan, the sisters I left behind, they can't even leave their house without being escorted. They can't even get in their car and drive. They can't go to work anymore. One of the examples I give is, imagine being about a 25, 26-year-old Afghan female. From the time you were born, you were told, not the time you were born, but at the time you were going to kindergarten, you were told, go get an education, go do this, go do this, go do that. And then here, they're in the prime of their life. I have cousins that are doctors that are not working because they're females. I mean, imagine that. I have one that is an anesthesiologist. Afghanistan desperately needs women doctors, but they can't leave the house without being escorted. And things like the other day, they gave out a directive that, you have all male have to come to the mosque for all 5 prayers. What are you supposed to do if you're in the middle of a surgery? You just say, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop the surgery. I mean, I don't want to get that detailed into it, but my point is that we need to go back. So as far as what can we do, we need State Department to work with all these organizations. And honestly, at this point, these organizations have become experts on how to get people out, because we have put so many spreadsheets together with all the attachments. So we pretty much, most of us know what State Department wants. And instead of working against us, and I know some of them are trying, they don't have the resource for it. They could easily go to DOD and say, DOD, give us some manpower to help us. They can easily go to these, nonprofit organizations and say, hey, we will watch what you're doing, but let us be a team instead of just, at a distance. Half the time, I've got minors in UAE, okay? They've been there for 8 months without their parents, and their parents are legal permanent residents in the United States. I mean, imagine that. That's just me. I mean, every single person has a story, and it's not about me, but every single person has a story. They left behind a child, and that's the other thing. Majority of the people that we did get out, they're the breadwinners of these Afghan families, and they've been stuck in UAE or Doha or different places. They left behind their families. The women can't work, so the families are starving to death. How can we as Americans say, you know what, this is okay? It's not okay. We are Americans. We're better than this.
Thank you very much. I would like to hear from Ambassador for the same question. How do you see the attention for Afghanistan and the crisis right now, and how we can bring it back? As Ms. Nasima mentioned some ideas. What do you think? What we can do for this situation?
Yeah, I agree in the sense that we've got to get the story out, and the story has to be told through a person. You can't tell it in numbers. You can't tell it in statistics. We need to show the picture of a starving child that is there because of it, or of a child that's trafficked to be a bride, and this child's 6 years old, and maybe one that has gotten out, or somebody here gets them out and then has them tell their story. I was a child bride at age 6. This is what happened to me. And that's, we move by our heart, not by our head. We move by emotion, and that we've got to tell and have that emotional story laid out here. And I want to jump back and piggyback on one other comment. Look at the axis that's developed in the world today now. You've got a Russia-China axis that's taking place, these two very large, very powerful countries, and now allied with two terrorist states, with Iran and the Taliban in Afghanistan. Now, who doesn't think that Russia, China is going to use the Taliban, the Iranians, and their terrorist proxies to hit us, to hit Western Europe or other places? Guys, I mean, we have to fight against this axis, and this will be a more deadly axis because their willingness and ability now to just fund and give money and arms to these terrorist groups that know no bounds, none. And I look at that and I just go, boy, we have really got a Donnybrook on our hands now.
Yeah, thank you. I saw Mr. Owen just shaking his head when mentioned about the State Department working with these NGOs who help people to evacuate to America. How do you see, what is your suggestion for us here to help Afghans?
Was that for Josh?
Yes, Josh, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't pick it up for a second. It cut out
fine.
whenever you said my name. I apologize for that. Yeah.
No worries.
Those were amazing points. And honestly, it's a massive concern. One of the things that you had asked earlier was what can the students do? Something that I hinted at history and learning from history before, and something that a lot of younger folks, I'm conflating a couple of things that were said. Something that a lot of folks do nowadays is they just listen. They don't do any research and learn on their own. And this is happening more and more prevalent with how the 24-hour news cycle that was discussed earlier. So what we hear is not necessarily indicative of reality, and what we read is also kind of being bastardized in some of these capacities. So in this constant news cycle reality that we live in, one of the things that people don't tend to do is look outside of what's being fed. Well, to the points that were made previously, we have these axis groups that are getting together, and it's extremely prevalent that the understanding of the proxy war concept that's been happening. I don't know. I mean, as far back in history that I remember, as far as like the Revolutionary War, I'm sure it's happened a lot longer than that. I think it's been happening since the Roman times, actually. But regardless, again, learning from these realities, we continue to look at the shiny object, and the more that we get inundated with social media, the more that we get inundated with, hey, let's go out tonight, let's have a drink. The more that we get inundated with all these different things, we look at this information overload and we say, man, I really just don't care to hear about that nowadays. Well, the sad factor is there's the World Food Program. They set aside $5 million, $5 million in a food program specifically for Afghanistan. And I'm sorry, enough funding for food for 5 million people, for Afghanistan. And once they got in on the ground in Afghanistan, they saw that the needs were somewhere closer to 10 to 11 million. So while all these things are happening, we want to look at these compounded realities that there's about 11 million people starving in one country alone because of political failures. On top of that, we're not talking about the persecution. We're not talking about anything else, just actually the food crisis in one country. Now, if you want to look at drawing these lines and understanding kind of the reality that we're all living in, look across at Ukraine and the fact that there's a lot of discussion now about this grain shortage that's going to come up because of the war in Ukraine and Russia, because of sanctions and everything else. So you can't live your life just in understanding what's on a news channel and in this 24-hour cycle where you're being fed everything. You have to look and understand how compounded all of these problems are. And that goes back to specifically to the axis, that goes back to specifically the inability, really not, it's not an inability, the failure of any one government that's managing a lot of these crises that are going on at one time. You have to understand that. So as students, getting prepared to go out into the world and understand your role in the world. Your role is to never stop learning and never stop understanding the realities that actually exist versus the realities you're being fed. Being aware of all of these things happening all at the same time and not just being moved from one shining object to the next, it's something that every single student can take away from this conversation.
Thank you very much. We have now maybe around 124,000 Afghans who have been evacuated to the US. And Ms. Jafary, one of them, I would like to ask her, how was support for Afghan refugees in the US? Did you find it beneficial, or how we can, the US government can improve it if there is any shortcomings with that support for Afghan refugees?
خانم لیلا از شما سوال پرسیدن، گفتن که در حدود 124,000 افغان فعلا به امریکا راه یافتن و شما چی تجربه دارین که چقدر مفید بوده و چی کارا را باید امریکا بکنه که بهتر و بهتر شود در زمینه از این که افغانا را اینجا در امریکا جابجا کنن.
تشکر. من میخوایم به شخصا بگم که برای من تجربه من تا حالا یعنی خوب بوده. من واقعا از وضعیتم راضی هستم، اما خب وضعیت من شاید فرق میکنه. شما ترجمه کنید.
As of now, the situation is good and I'm satisfied, but maybe it's only me who is satisfied of the benefits and all those supports, but others will be different.
من میخوایم همینجوری البته تشکر کنم از دولت آمریکا و مردم مهربان آمریکا.
I would like to thank the US government and the United States people who helped us.
ولی تجربیات و شنیده هایی که از سایر مهاجرینی که در امریکا هستن، افغان ها، من خبر دارم، یکی از راه حل هایی که پیشنهاد میکنیم این است زمینه بیشتر فراهم شود که مهاجرین با قوانین امریکا آشنا شوند. باید.
What I heard from our relatives, from our friends in other states, there's a need to pave a way to explain the United States law to them more, so they get to know about the United States more.
به خاطر از اینکه هر چقدر که افغان ها قوانین اینجا بفهمن و یاد بگیرن، همو قدر ادغام پذیری از اینا در جامعه آسان، خوب و با دستاورد خواهد بود.
The more Afghans get to know about the rules and regulations in United States, the more flexible they will be, and they will accept the differences in United States, and they will be more beneficial for United States.
بیشتر من تاکیدم روی امازی بود که یک زمینه اینمی فهمیدن یاد گرفتن قوانین که از قانون خانواده تا محکمه است و در کنارش زمینه های فراهم شود که مردم مهاجرین زبان را یاد بگیرن، زبان اینجا را یاد بگیرن.
I would like to focus more on rules and regulations, starting from family issues to court rules and laws. And the next issue I would like to focus is the language. There have to be a focus on teaching English language to the Afghan families.
و حرف آخر می است که بیشتر این آموزش ها برای همه مهاجرین نیاز هست، خصوصا خانواده هایی که پرجمعیت هستند، فرزندان زیادی دارند. اینا هر چقدر زودتر زبان را یاد بگیرن در جامعه ادغام شوند، برای اینا و فرزندانشان و جامعه آمریکا خوب است. تشکر.
There is a need of English language for everyone, especially for those who have children and who have bigger families. The more they get to know and the more they learn English, they will be good for the society.
تمام شد حرفای من. بسیار تشکر از شما ترجمه میکنه.
Thank you so much. She's done.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone's and Shirzad for translation. The last question for the panelists is what books, articles, movies, anything that help you to understand about Afghanistan and the crisis right now, you suggest to our students to get and improve their understanding and knowledge about the Afghanistan and the situation. Mr. Ambassador?
Yeah, the best thing I think students can do is talk to somebody from Afghanistan. I've got a student in my class where I teach at Catholic that's from Afghanistan, and her knowledge is the best source that I found of just a very practical level of here's what her family in Afghanistan is experiencing. And you've got students there at American that are Afghanis. Talk to them. That's, I think, the best source people could go to.
Thank you. Ms. Nasima?
In addition to that, I think, instead of just looking at CNN or Fox or whatever, there's other ones. Like when I used to teach language and culture, I would actually have them read the newspapers that came out of the country or the newscasts. So like Voice of America, if you listen to it, they really do give you both sides. And most of them are Afghans, it doesn't matter what their ethnicities are, but they do give you like the ground truth of what is going on. And because they know people, they've talked to people. And also they have reaches to where they actually interview Taliban people and, Americans in different, where some of the US media might not have access to those individuals.
Ms. Jafary?
خانم فاطمه از شما پرسیدن که شما چی را پیشنهاد میکنین، کدام موارد، کدام فیلم های اگر کدام چیز باشه یا قطعاتی که توسط افراد متفاوت نوشته شده، کدام از او را امریکایی یعنی بیشتر مطالعه کنند که در مورد افغانستان بهتر و بهتر بدانند؟
بله، بسیار موضوع مهم هست. من میخوایم بگم که یک تاریخچه دوستی طولانی که ایالات متحده و افغانستان داره، این بود دوستی طولانی مدت از این برجسته شود توسط حالا یا داستان یا فیلم هایی که ساخته میشه مستند.
I would like to focus on a long history which Afghanistan and United States share with each other, and maybe it can be published in articles.
و بیشتر آن چیزی که من چون شاهد بودم خودم روی ازی تاکید میکنم، دستاوردهای زیادی را که مردم افغانستان خصوصا زنان و جوانان با کمک ایالات متحده در این 20 سال به دست آوردن، از جمله مثلا تحصیل زنان، کار کردن زنان در چوکی‌های بلند، ساختن دانشگاه‌های بسیار زیاد، فارغ شدن دانشجویان بسیار زیاد، افتخار مقام های علمی جهانی برای افغان ها، اینها بیشتر باید در جامعه آمریکا از طریق تلویزیون ها، سوشال مدیا، مقاله ها در روزنامه ها انعکاس داده شد.
I would like to focus on those points which United States and with the help of Afghans, they developed the education system, how women worked, how they built so many universities, how the students brought so many medals and honors from outside the countries with the help of United States. And I would like to focus on those issues, and they can be highlighted and published.
تشکر.
Okay, thank you very much. Josh, do you want to add something here for our students?
Yeah, you asked for some publications of sorts. There's two that have been really, really good. They're not a book, they're not a movie, but online publications. War on the Rocks and The Long War Journal. The Long War Journal. Those are two really good publications that have gone back to the early days of Afghanistan. Both of them just also happen to cover things like Iraq and Syria, but both of those cover in a lot of historical context, specifically from not just the military side of the house, but also from a lot of the sociocultural side of the house, where the angles of how the military has had to learn how to adapt to the concept of not just going in and taking over a country, war in and of itself, but also the nation building aspects that have come into play in both of those countries. So both of those are very, very good publications online. Again, War on the Rocks and The Long War Journal. They do a really good job of detailing multiple different aspects of the realities in those two countries and the wars in both of those areas.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the very powerful ideas that you shared today with us. We are reaching to our end of session, and I want to just pass it to our director to close it.
Thank you so much, Fatema, and thank you so much, panelists. That brings tonight's event to a close. Thank you all so much for joining us. Before we end, I'd like to extend a big thank you to our guests, Ambassador Brownback, Josh Owen, Nasima, and Laila, and our moderator, Fatema Ahmadi. I would also like to take this time to thank our partner, Operation Sacred Promise. To learn more about Operation Sacred Promise or donate to their cause, please visit opsacredpromise.org. And please make sure to follow @AUSGKPU on all socials to keep up to date with all of our events. Have a great evening. Good night.